My big question for you tonight as a leader is to think about um, who is successful and why are they successful? So, who is successful and why are people successful? So, this is um, kind of a big question, right? And I think one of the interesting things was a lady named Angela Duckworth did a study, and this book may look familiar to some of you. Grit. Has anybody read this book? Or has kind of anybody a little bit of it or heard of it? Okay. Yeah, so book is called Grit. It's by Angela Duckworth. All right. And she was a former teacher, Harvard grad. I mean, smarty pants here. Okay. But psychologist, researcher, and she was a math teacher, by the way. If you look her up on YouTube, I'll show you a little clip of her. But she did a study here and talked about and tried to figure out who's successful and why. And the question she asked a lot of people is, what was the biggest predictor of success? Being really talented or making effort? Okay. What do you guys think? Any thoughts? Number one or number two? How many guys say number one? If you're talented, you're successful. How many guys say number two? If you work hard, you're successful. Interesting. We're teaching you well here at Forza. So I think one of the things that she shared is that when you have talent and you work hard, you acquire something called skill. And then if you have skill and you work hard, then you can create something called achievement. So talent times effort equals skill. And skill times effort equals achievement.
What was the second one called?
Her first one was talent times effort equals skill. And the second one was skill times effort equals achievement. What's the common denominator or the common word in both of those things? Effort, right? So you multiply that effort, twice the effort, you're going to get the results that you're looking for. I think, and one of the things that she shares is a definition of what she calls grit. Okay, and again, that's the name of her book, Grit. So what the heck is grit? Well, she says it's the sustained application of effort to a long-term goal. And she found that this was the biggest predictor of achievement, is having grit. Again, I'll say it one more time. Grit, the sustained application of effort to a long-term goal, is the biggest predictor of achievement. Now, you might wonder, I'll let you guys right there. Good stuff. Now, you might wonder, you're like thinking, okay, who did she study, Kyle? She went to the Naval Academy. To study the cadets there. She went and studied the Navy SEALs. And anybody know a Navy SEAL? Those soldiers, they're no joke. She studied some of her 7th and 8th grade math students. She went to Harvard and studied graduate students there. So she studied all kinds of different people. And she created a test, a grit scale to determine what your level of grittiness was. And it wasn't really important necessarily where you fell on the grit scale, but she believed that you could grow your grit. Okay. And that if you're growing your grit, you're becoming grittier. And that's putting yourself in position to achieve more than you would have if you hadn't been working on your grit. So that was something cool that I learned out of her book, and talking and working with different scenarios with this. Have you ever looked at someone and just go, "Wow, they're so talented. I could never do what they do. They're just so smart, or they're so this." Anybody ever done that? They've looked at somebody and said, "Man, yeah, like, man, how do I do that?" And I think when you're gritty, the grit will trump the talent. And so you've got to think to yourself, a person who's gritty is says, so I know that grit will trump talent. And so that means I have a shot if I put in the effort. I think one of the cool things as a coach that we get to see is we get to see you girls grow your grit. Think about 12-year-old you. You are 12, Katie. Think about 10-year-old you or 9-year-old you. Are you grittier now than you were before? Do you think a little bit different about how to do hard things? Um, you probably do. I think one of the things that Angela said in her book is that talent counts once, but effort counts twice. And I think that's always a great thing. I was never the fastest volleyball player or the smartest person in the class. But boy, I was not afraid of getting out on the court and sweating and doing the work. And that was really cool for me to figure out that as a player. Okay, any questions so far? Bia, I appreciate you jumping in there and asking me to repeat stuff. That is really, really important. I want you to make sure that you get everything that you need out of this. So I appreciate that. Thanks for letting me do that for you. Okay. So being gritty can be hard though, huh? Right? It can be hard. Because if we're being gritty, we're usually in a situation where things aren't great, right? Or we're not great at it yet. And so we're driving that and trying to struggle and work hard to be great. So how do you grow your grit? And Angela came up with 4 main things that she talks about in this book to grow your grit. Okay. And so I'm going to talk about those in a second. Let me share my screen with you here so I can pull up. So this is a TED Talk that Angela did. Can everyone see? Give me a thumbs up that you can see that okay? Fantastic. So this is called Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance by Angela Lee Duckworth. It has a couple views, yeah? Just a couple. Slightly popular. And so this is a fun one. It's only about 6 minutes long, but it's a quick little TED Talk. So if you're so inclined to, you can go ahead and click on to. You can go ahead and write that down real quick, or take a picture of it or whatever, a screenshot, and then when you're bored, you're not feeling too confident one day. You feel like you need something to pick you up. Watch some grit, and Angela will help pick you up. She's a good, engaging speaker. Okay. So that's Angela. Now, one of the cool things that she did, she created her own website about grit. And if you type in Angela Duckworth grit scale, it will pull you up to this. It's see Angela Duckworth.com. Okay. And then / grit that scale dash scale. It will give you this test, and you can take this test and answer these questions honestly and go through it, these 10 questions, and it will give you your grit score on a scale of 1 to 5. 1 meaning you don't got very much grit, and 5 meaning you're as gritty and grimy as it gets, man, and you're uh, highly determined and highly motivated. Um, and it's okay. I think one of the cool things I've given this quiz or this assessment or scale to some of the teams that I've worked with in the past. I even had one of my freshman biology classes who wanted to do this and see how gritty they were. Because some of them felt like, oh, I'm gritty, I'm tough, I'm determined. And so it was interesting to kind of for them to see it. I think one of the cool things about this as well is that as you mature and you grow, whether you're an old dude like me or a young person like yourself, as you change and you grow within your experiences, your grit can grow, and you can go back and kind of reassess where your grit's at. Are you growing your grit? So I would challenge you to take this. It's 10 questions. See what your grit score is, and maybe we can talk about it next Tuesday and see kind of where you're at, and if we can develop a little plan. So I encourage you to do that. Let's see. Our next thing that I want to get to here is just back to here. There you guys are. Okay. So the next thing I want to share with you is Angela's 4 keys to growing your grit. Okay. I'm going to give them to you and then I'll talk about them. Okay. So make sure you give yourself a little space to fill in some good stuff. The first one is to develop a fascination. All right. First one was develop a fascination. All right. Presley, is there something in your life that you just absolutely fascinated and curious about? You just always are like, man, I wonder how that works. I wonder how that is. Is there anything in your life like that?
Um, Roller coasters.
Oh, there you
Um,
go. That's a great one.
Stay up. Or airplanes. How do they not just fall down?
They're so big and heavy, right?
Yeah.
Totally. That's great. Absolutely. And for some people, when you develop a fascination like that, literally, it it could drive your whole career, or it could take you in a direction that you never thought about. So, if we're applying this to leadership and volleyball, um, this is a time where you need to ask questions, right? Develop a fascination. Um, for me as a coach, I've always been fascinated in how different girls work together as a team versus boys. And it's always been fascinating to me and such a challenge. I mean, obviously, I'm a guy and I've been on a lot of guys' teams, and we just operate so different than girls' teams. And I love working with female athletes and getting them to all work together and try to form a team. And so that for me, that's one of the things that I love about being a coach and a teacher, but mostly as a coach, is to try to make that all happen. So first one is develop a fascination. Second one, daily improvement. Number 3, remind yourself of the greater purpose. And then lastly, adopt a growth mindset. Have any of your teachers ever talked to you guys about growth mindset, or has anybody heard about that before? Oh, yes, mine. I have a few nodders.
Every
Katie,
single
heard that
day.
before? Who's heard about growth mindset before? Anybody want to share? Good. Some of you guys have heard about that before. Excellent. Excellent. Cool. Okay. So let's go back, talk about number one, develop a fascination. This is where you have to ask questions and you're searching for answers, right? So you're going to want to try to find questions about volleyball or about leadership or about being great and seek to gain knowledge about that fascination, right? I remember when I was first starting becoming a coach, and my friend said, "Hey, man, you should coach girls," and I was just like, "What? No way!" And then it was so much fun coaching girls and figuring that whole you guys all out and just how girls work together um, and how each group of girls is so different. And I really was like, man, how do I become a good coach? And so I got a mentor, and I listened to him, and I listened to another female coach those were my mentors. And we talked about volleyball, we talked about team building. I was just really curious about it. So um, seek to gain knowledge or gain experience to answer some of those questions. Sometimes the best way to gain knowledge is to go and do. But lots of times when you go and do without a lot of experience, what ends up happening? You fail, right? Or you don't do so great. And that's okay. But that's one way of developing your fascination. Um, Number two, daily improvement. Aim to improve yourself every day. Compete with who you were yesterday. I love that. When I read that in the book, I highlighted it, I underlined it, I even wrote it down on a sticky note, stuck it on my mirror. I was just like, compete with who you were yesterday. So many times we compare ourselves to other people, right? Um, and boy, we just need to be better than we were yesterday. Um, and She tells a little bit of a story about a swimmer who was in practice and his coach would challenge him. What was your time today? Oh, it was a minute 15 seconds. Well, I want to see a minute 14 and 30 seconds this today. And so he would challenge himself to be better than he was yesterday. And this was an Olympic swimmer. I think that daily improvement, even the best people try to improve every single day. What makes them great? That's what makes them gritty. Number three, remind yourself of the greater purpose. Um, I think if you find someone that you feel like is gritty, right? They achieve those long-term goals. They stay determined. They're curious. They have that fascination. Um, Most of them will see their ultimate aims or goals as deeply connected to a world that's beyond themselves. One of the examples she talks about in the book is, a bricklayer, you know, could just be a bricklayer building the church, okay? Or a bricklayer could have the mindset of, I'm helping to build God's house. And that means something more than just doing a job. So how do you connect or apply this to volleyball and or your team? Okay. Is there a greater purpose that's just beyond, well, we play together and I dig balls so the setter can set? Okay. How many of you have formed amazing friendships in a volleyball team? Right? That's bigger than just pass, set, hit, right? And I think that's part of developing your grit is to remind yourself of the greater purpose that can come from whatever goal you're working at that day. Um, And that's a good one. I love that one. The last one is adopt a growth mindset. And so a fixed mindset is when you hear someone say, I can't learn anymore, or I can't get any better, or this is just who I am, and this is how I do things. How many guys know someone like that? Usually, and anybody know an adult who talks like that? Boo, right? Then you could say, that's just a fixed mindset. You need to have a growth mindset. You can do amazing things. You can go beyond what you are. And I think that's where it's at. A growth mindset has the mindset that they have the ability that they can do anything. It might take a lot of effort, but they have that ability to know that their brain is very elastic and plastic and is moldable and can change and learn new things. Even when you're an old dude like me, I love learning new things. Probably takes me a little longer than you guys because you're young and you've got all kinds of energy and you've got lots of space in your brain that I don't at this point. But I know I can learn. Might just take me a little longer. Have that mindset that you can always learn new things and connect to that. And I think if you do that, you will be able to grow your grit. So one of the things is as you pursue becoming more gritty and growing your grit, people will see it. And people want to be around leaders who are pursuing greatness. You can feel that. You can feel their energy because when you're growing your own grit, you're driving forward. You're pursuing something that's not just about today, although it could be, but it's about something long term as well. So, really great book, Grit. You can read the whole thing. There's some really cool parts in it. It's a book that you could probably will end up reading in college if you take a leadership course in college. But you guys are awesome and smart. Doesn't mean you can't start developing your grit right now. So my last thing I'll tell you is I challenge you to do your grit scale and see where you're at. And then my last thing is don't forget to make your bed. Okay. Any questions for me? Awesome. You guys are great. It's always great to see you guys on 7:30. Thanks so much for your time. Have a great night. And I'll see you guys next week on Tuesday, 7:30, with some more good stuff on leadership.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye. Bye, Kyle.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle.
My pleasure.
Kyle.
Yo.
Kyle, look.
I see.
Wait,
Wait.
I'm trying to flip the camera.
Okay. Woo! Good job, Bia. You
like
are gritty.
Aced the test.
I love
Thank
it.
you, Kyle.
Absolutely. Have a great night, y'all. Have a good weekend.